Good to see you there then.
I'm hiding.
Now live on YouTube.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We'll just go to the first item of business. Sorry about this, hold on. So item 1, receive declarations of interest and procedural number 8. Are there any?
Are we going to do a roll call, Chairman, just to make sure who's here?
Yeah, I thought we was going to do that before we went live streaming, Sarah.
Okay.
So I did ask the officers if we're clear.
I'll run through the.
So see, I've only just joined, so I thought you'd probably done it.
No, we need to do the roll call whilst we're live streaming.
Right,
So
I
James,
see.
could you
Okay.
do that?
Okay, I'll run through the councillors. Councillor Adams, can you confirm
Here.
if you're present, please?
Yeah.
Councillor
Present,
Beadle.
here, whatever.
Councillor Beadle.
I saw him earlier.
Can see him there. I'll confirm that. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Ballman.
Present and none.
Councillor Catchpole.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Hartley.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Councillor Holland.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Kelly.
Present, declarations for agenda item 11 on licensing as a member of the licensing panel, and any items for environmental as Deputy Chairman for Environmental Excellence.
Okay. Councillor King has been having trouble, so he can't get on here. Councillor Murrell, I don't believe is present. Councillor Nurdin.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Prutton.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Ryman Tubb. No. Councillor Riley.
Present, no declaration. Thank you, James.
And Councillor Shaw.
No declarations.
We're done.
Chair, just to say that I am present, Stuart Beadle here, and that I am a director of a company in receipt of government grants operated by Broadland District Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, apologies for absence, James.
I have no apologies for absence.
Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of July. This stage is just on accuracy. So we can go through the minutes, please. Page 5 of your agenda, papers. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. I've got one here, James. Third paragraph from the bottom of page 9. Chairman expressed concern that he was not aware of this group, which I was. However, this paragraph relates to the vice chair, and it was carrying out work the Overview Scrutiny Committee had put on its work programme some time ago. The joint investigation with South Norfolk Council. It was actually the vice chair, my colleague Tony, that said that. So if you could just amend that, please.
Yeah, I concur with what the chairman says.
So the minutes are true record. Everybody agree? Yes. Any disagreement? No. I would take that as agreed, James. Right. Any matters arising?
Sue Holland has her hand raised.
Sue, fire away, please.
Yes, hello. It's actually about the project, the work program that we were talking about. You were just doing the thing about, and the working group that was set up. And I think Emma, we asked Emma if she said she would come back to some information, which we have got. So thank you for that, Emma, because that was very helpful. But I'm quite interested in it because, well, first of all, the note on the Constitution isn't 1515. I think it's 1615. That threw me a bit, but I did find it in the end. What I'm puzzled about really is that the last meeting of the Wellbeing Panel appears to have been last November. There was an informal briefing in February, which appears to be the place at which this was put forward. There were several presentations done. There's no reference that says who was present. It was just an informal briefing. They said there's no minutes, but there was a recommendation that the working group be set up. What I'm curious about really is why it was done at an informal meeting, and also why they felt it was necessary to have a working group when I think there are 6 members of the panel, and there are 4 people on this working group. It just seems odd to me that the Wellbeing Panel hasn't met, doesn't seem to be doing, or says it hasn't got anything to do, and yet we've got a working group set up to work on something that I would have thought was partially the purview of the Wellbeing Panel. I don't know if anybody's got a suggestion for that. Thank you.
Chair, I can pick up a bit of this. I don't know if I'll be able to answer all of it, Sue, but I'll answer as much as I can. So in terms of the email that I sent round, the working group, that can be set up by the portfolio holder under his delegation. So Fran set up that working group to look at that specific area, which he can do under his delegations. We don't need a formal panel to meet to be able to do that, and the working group is a joint working group between the 2 councils, so there has been the 4 people allocated from Broadland and then 4 people allocated from South Norfolk to work on that working group. Other than that, I've not been close enough to be able to provide you any answers, and I'm scanning around the room to see if I can see anyone that is involved in the working group to try and give you a bit more. Ken's raising his hand. Ken, can you assist?
All I can say was that at some stage, the portfolio holder asked me if I would be interested in part of a working group with the joint councils, which I said yes, and that's what's been going on, and it's still ongoing at the moment, and that's all I've got to say on the matter.
Thanks, Ken. I think it's also, Jamie's just arrived, so it'll be handy for Jamie to come on this point. I think it's also just worth noting it's not a decision-making group, it is a working party. But Jamie, did you want to come in on the party?
Yes, I can try and help. Apologies, Councillor Holland, I only caught part of your question before I joined. But Emma's absolutely right that the jurisdiction for setting up a working group is not a formal decision. It doesn't have any formal frame of reference at all. It's an informal meeting of councillors and officers to help work through some policy issues before bringing forward a paper through the proper route to allow there to be the proper decision making and scrutiny arrangements of anything that we choose to take forward. From memory, the group Fran, Councillor Wymark agreed with his opposite number at South Norfolk is 3 plus a deputy. And I think they also agreed it was, of those 3, 2 Conservative, 1 Lib Dem from both councils to give some weight of view to all parties represented. And the group, much like the Waste Services Review Group, has been meeting just informally with members to work through an amount of detail that officers wouldn't normally bring to a formal policy committee. The only other point I heard you mention is that the Wellbeing Panel hasn't met since October. It actually met last week formally, but there has been a bit of a hiatus, not least because of COVID, although that isn't entirely the only reason. But yeah, it met last week, so do be assured that it is it still has an active agenda of things to work through.
Can I just make a comment here as well? I think part of the problem here is that when we was at the last meeting, and Emma, if you recall this, you're quite right around the Constitution. I've seen your email, Emma, so thanks for that. However, I think the thing is that it's where it's been signposted. I can't see any signposting for this. And partly the reason why, you know, sort of looking at this a bit further, if we look at the waste working group, Jamie, we'll know about that. Everybody knows about it. Why? Because it's signposted through the panel very clearly in minutes, etc., etc. Plus, also there was direct communications about it. This one, nobody seems to know about it, and I think part of the reason is in relation to governance. And perhaps we could have a look at this. Is that when you go back onto the minutes, I couldn't find anything at all. So there's been no formal meeting where it was declared there will be, say, Kenny on there, Dave Thomas, etc. We've got these names listed and it will be meeting. You can't actually find a minute that says that. The only thing that is on there, and it's hard to find, is a briefing document. And it says this briefing document was put to an informal meeting. There's no more than that. And this is why I think everybody, including all the ONS members last time, no matter what party or whatever, didn't have a clue about it. That's quite unusual. Normally, we would know that there's a working party ongoing, and we do with the waste. Everybody knows about it. And when you go back to the minutes, you can clearly see it all identified in that way. But there is no minute on this. There's no. It just says this presents to an informal meeting, no record of who's at the meeting or anything. So that's why we're all blind on this, I believe. And I just think in terms of governance, if we could just have a look at that, Emma, in terms of, because it's not natural, it's not correct that none of us are aware of it, you know, and hence we've had this debate now, which unfolded at the last ONS meeting, and now we're just catching back up on the matter rising as well. If all that's transparent and clear, this wouldn't be happening. So could we do that, Emma?
Yeah, I mean, just responding on that point, I take on board what you're saying. I think it's been a little bit of a perfect storm, Steve, if I'm going to be really honest with you. You know, this all kind of started to be formed, and then we went into COVID. Just in terms of the working group, that is something that doesn't, as I said, doesn't need to go through the panel. That's for the portfolio holder to decide. So that's no different to how this would have been done in the past. One thing that I think probably in the past we would have picked this up through would have been through your member bulletins that we do for you. Now they've been overtaken obviously by COVID, but now we're kind of moving back into that business as usual. This is the kind of thing that will start briefing members in and bring into that member bulletin more going forward, so that we will increase that awareness on there. But I think there's been a few things that have, I mean, it seems a bit of a strong word, but a bit of a casualty of COVID, and this was probably one of them. But I think, you know, there's nothing been done untoward. We're not trying to do anything in any way, shape or form that's not open or transparent. But we will make sure that we can do, I think, Jamie, if I pick up with you in the next member bulletin, we can do a bit of a catch-all on this one to bring members more up to date with where the working group is.
Yeah, no, thanks, Em. As I say, there is an issue though around the panel, and that is that I know when I picked this up about the waste working party, that was explained adequately at a panel meeting because it's actually from the panel. Now I know that portfolio holder has the delegated authority to put on the working party who they want, as long as there's political balance, which is what James referred to, 1 and 3. From each council. However, that was clearly flagged up in a panel meeting and declared as such. So whilst strictly speaking that doesn't have to happen, I think that just in terms of overview, not scrutiny but overview, it's just around the practice on that, and that's why it's not just about members bulletin. I didn't look at any members bulletin to find out about the waste contract. I knew perfectly well from the discussions that was ongoing and contact that was made at the time, and also from the panel. So it's just also the wellbeing panel in terms of overview as well. You know, I think it's courteous as well that, you know, they could have had a Zoom wellbeing meeting, you know, and then the brief given to them, rather than this informal sort of situation, you know. So it's just that overview really, Emma, you know. Right, okie dokie. So we'll move on then.
Chair, you have got Sue Holland wanting to come back, I think, and Natasha's raised her hand as well.
Thank you. I have been looking, but as I say, I don't see all the boxes, so I do rely upon an officer. So I don't know which was first. So do you want to go first, Sue?
Well, yes, thank you. I was just going to say, I completely understand that the portfolio holder has that authority to set up a working group. I was just disappointed that it wasn't more obvious to people. And I do understand that with the COVID, clearly things have got a bit confused, and that may be part of it. I really would just like it to be confirmed that, you know, it's appropriate for everybody to know it's happening, I think. And I would also highlight the fact that the Labour Party do not figure in this. So, you know, they would never, even if the two groups participating in it know about it, there are still members who would not hear about it at all. So, you know, I just would like confirmation that when working groups are set up, councillors are at the very least aware of them. I think that is only right and proper, frankly. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Natasha?
You were going to call me someone else's name.
I nearly did.
I
Sorry,
heard it.
I stopped myself.
Well done. Yeah, I was just Sue has pretty much said what I was going to say, really. Jamie commented earlier saying that all parties are represented. They're not. The Labour Party are not represented across either council in this group. And I know this is an informal group and it doesn't have to be Widdicombe's like committees do, but you've got an un-Widdicombe panel setting up an un-Widdicombe working group about a really important issue, actually. And I don't think that's right. And the lack of transparency around it, when one party is excluded from it, most members don't really know about it. And the remit seemed to be going beyond what it was originally set up for. So I'm just want my comments to be noted that I don't think it's right that the direction of it and also the fact that my party in particular is excluded from it. But I do understand why. You don't have to, but just because you don't have to do something, it doesn't mean it's right. Thank you, Natasha. Okay, so unless there's anybody else, I think it's probably time to move on. Okie dokie, so going, gone. Chairman's announcements, there are none. Public speaking, James, item 6, are there any?
Sorry, there's no public speaking.
Thank you. Right, in that case, we'll move on to item 7, cabinet reports. We're bringing forward the temporary pavement one. Could the officer present, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for bringing this matter forward in the order. That's helpful to me. I'm David Pulgotto. I'm Senior Licensing Officer at Broadland Council. This report concerns some new draft legislation, the Business and Planning Bill, which is currently receiving attention with the Lords and due to receive royal assent later in July. So it's still very much in draft format, and this report has been drafted very quickly at the end of last week. And I'll explain in a little bit the reason for the expediency with that. Now, the purpose of the legislation, I'll just give you a quick overview of it, if I may, is to assist businesses to increase the available seating space they have for cafes, public houses, restaurants and such like, because with the social distancing measures that have been enforced through the COVID controls, they've obviously lost seating space. So it's deemed that this is a safe way of increasing that capacity. So there will be an application process to the District Council by the persons in control of the business. There will be some consultation with the Highways Department and other agencies. There will be a fee, and one of the matters we've put in the recommendations is asking you to agree that the appropriate fee, which I'll come on to in a minute. There's a very short timeline of 5 working days consultation period, and then a further short timescale of determination of 5 days. So there's going to have to be quite a quick turnaround with these. And one of the things we're particularly concerned about is that if we are unable to process the applications appropriately, they are deemed to be approved. So one of the reasons for getting this report into yourselves and onto Cabinet subsequently was to make sure we're in the appropriate position, one, to assist businesses in their attempts of economic recovery, but also make sure we're in the right position to actually process and determine the applications. There will be some standard conditions applied. There will also be the opportunity for us to apply specific conditions that are specific and tailored to the particular premises. It's really going to be a balancing act, balancing between the economic needs of the businesses and any other potentially undesirable effects of the table seating that's applied for. So we will be taking into account potential antisocial behaviour, crime, noise and other matters, as well as other safety aspects on the highway. The report asks for a delegation to officers to determine and process the applications, and also a separate delegation to slightly different list of officers to carry out enforcement work. We have spread that net quite widely amongst officers, but the intention is that the lion's share of the work will be done by the licensing enforcement officers in the council. But as a bit of a safety net, we've included quite a few of us in there, partly because we don't know what the final outcome will be. So we're expecting applications to be made as soon as this legislation receives royal assent. And I say the reason for getting the report in quickly was to make sure we're in a good position to be able to process those applications when they come in.
Right, thank you. So I'll open it up for questions.
Tony Adams, I think, had his.
Councillor Adams, are you
Yeah,
there?
yeah, thanks. The only thing that does concern me, I go along with the majority of what we've just heard, is that there is no appeal against what a trader might feel is an unjustified decision to refuse. That does concern me. I think there should always be, ground for appeal to an independent panel consisting of councillors. If it is to the case that the officers are quite satisfied with the application, fine. But if they are minded to refuse it for whatever reason, I'm not saying those reasons are unreasonable, I feel that there should be a small panel of, say, 3 councillors who can just very quickly review that at very short notice. Chairman, thank you.
Yes, thank you. The legislation as it stands has no formal appeal process. I think what we would certainly propose, we haven't actually put this in the report, but I think what we propose is that any appeal to any decision would, due to its expediency, probably have to be dealt with through existing officer levels potentially, because once the 5 working days have passed, the application is deemed to be approved. So as the legislation is drafted, I think it'd be very difficult to convene a subcommittee. My initial intention when I saw the first draft was that was exactly what would happen, that there would be an appropriate subcommittee for appeals. But the way it's been drafted leaves very little practical time for that, unfortunately. But I would stress it's all still very much draft, so I'm sure we'll be looking at that matter again. But that was a matter we were concerned about as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Councillor Catchpole.
Sue?
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've read this and had 2 concerns. One was about food safety. I read in the other parts of the papers that the food safety section of Broadland is pushed staff-wise, and I'm wondering how that's going to be bolstered so that the potential extra risks of serving food and drinks outdoors are considered with regard to foodborne infections like salmonella and so on. And my other query was, although it says that there's no time to have a licensing subcommittee, could the councillors covering the area in which the application is made please be advised of the application so that they could have, at least within the first few days of the application, the opportunity to have a comment or make a comment?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, certainly we'll make sure the information is available to councillors when the applications are made, so they'll be aware. So you'll be aware of what's being requested and of the decision. And with the comment about the food safety team, the food safety officers are within the same team as licensing. I'm within that team as well. And yes, I agree with you. We are hard pushed, but we have we're recruiting to 2 positions at the minute: a team leader post and a district officer post. So there's some additional resource there on the way, and the information comes into the same team. So it's not like we'll be unaware. So we will be in a position to be able to make reasonable contact with the food business operator to make sure what they're doing is safe and does comply with food safety requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Leggett has put a comment, should like to say something, and also Councillor Brennan.
Councillor Leggett, hello.
Sorry about that. I didn't press the right button. Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to say something in support of this because I think it's good that it's been able to come today and will then go to Cabinet next week. So we're all prepared to enact this and get a speedy reply to restaurants, etc. Anybody who wants to have something outside. And just to say also, I note your concerns about food safety and the other points, which I shall make sure are followed up as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Also, comment from, I don't know who's first. I've got Sue and I've got Peter, sorry, Pruton, and I've also got Peter as well. Peter, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I don't know why you're asking me. I didn't raise my hand.
Sorry, I thought I picked up from the officer that you did. It must be my...
Councillor Brennan.
No, I'm absolutely mute at the moment.
Sorry, I do seem to be struggling a little bit with the audio here. Sorry, who's the member, Linda?
Councillor Brennan.
Oh, Brennan.
We also have a Councillor Beadle wants to come in. Oh, sorry, before that, Councillor Prutton.
Right, so, Councillor Brennan, would you like to fire away, please?
Thank you, Chairman.
Nigel?
Just thank you. I was just going off a slight tangent. Looking at paragraph 3.1, it says currently this council does not issue any permissions for furniture to be placed on the public highway adjacent to businesses. 2 premises spring immediately to mind. One, which is not a million miles away from Thorpe Lodge, dare I say on Thorpe Green, and one in Acorn, where they do have tables and chairs outside the premises on the pavement. Does this mean that they're actually in breach?
We have issued, Chairman, we have issued no licenses under the existing scheme, and this is very much a streamlined fast track scheme. We have not pursued anybody who may have infringed on the highway with their seating. and I'm not aware of those particular examples. Sometimes where the actual highway is, where the pavement is some not confusion, but of some discussion. And I think one of the matters going forward with this will actually be determining where the highway and footpath is and where the curtilage of the premises ends. And it may well be that there are one or two existing premises that have done things without permission in the past, but haven't necessarily caused a problem. Certainly if there's been any antisocial behaviour or other noise issues, then I think these things get flagged up. There may be one or two others that are in a similar position.
Okay, thank you, David. Yeah, no, appreciate that. Thank you for the clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sue Pruton.
My usual pedantic hat on, I'm afraid, my proofreading hat. Appendix 1, Section C, the 5th condition. You've got a typo there, your lines have slipped and the sentence is incomplete. I think you can guess what's there, but the furniture must not be stored on the, and it stops. There's a line drop down within the box.
Thank you, Sue. And then Stuart Beadle, I think we'll probably look to wind this up after that. So Stuart, fire away, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say, with these businesses coming out of lockdown, I think the last thing they want to be doing is applying to the district council for permission to do something which is only natural and good for their businesses to do, and of no public disbenefit. And why don't we look at this from the other way about, and that there's an assumption that they can do it in accordance with a code of conduct and which incorporates safety practices and other such relevant matters, but reserving the powers to enforce removal if they're not done. Let them get on with it. Let them get their business up and running, and to increase their marginal income, because it's the marginal income which is essential to these businesses, because the base income is going to be all swallowed up with everyday running expenses. So why don't we look at it the other way around, that there's a presumption that they can do it in accordance with a code of practice or something similar, and to avoid all this bureaucracy by these businesses to have to sit down and fill a form in when they've got better things to do. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to ask the officer to come in. Did I pick up right in the report that there's a presumption after 5 days that they have permission? Could you just clarify Stuart's point and my point, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, there's a 5 working day consultation period, and then there's a 5 working day determination period. And at the end of that determination period, if we haven't produced a formal decision ourselves, the application is deemed approved as applied for. And one very simple method that could be used is to make no comment or intervention whatsoever on the applications, and they would all go through as deemed or as applied for. I think the concern from the officer's point of view would be that there are a number of factors that we can take into account regarding general public safety, the food hygiene element, and crime, disorder and noise, which we could factor into that balancing act in considering these applications, which I think if we let them go through on the nod, as it were, we would still be duty bound to consult with the Highways Department or the Highway Authority, but we would effectively be not taking into account whatever they said, but that would certainly be a fast track way of approving them.
Phil Courtier would just like to come in.
Yeah, I picked up. Thanks, Linda. Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Happy to see you, Phil. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Thank you very much, Chair. Just very quickly, I think it's a very good point that Councillor Beadle is raising. The one thing I'd say is that is exactly what we are doing at this point in time. The legislation is not in place. There aren't pavement licenses, but people are operating on the pavements, and we are allowing that to happen because we want these businesses to be thriving as best they can at this time. So it's exactly what we're doing now. But when the legislation comes in, we can't just ignore that. There is a legislative framework that we need to abide by. Now, we will be taking a pragmatic approach. If a business is so overwhelmed with everything else that's going on, they don't get a license in, we will be talking with them and where possible, helping them fill out the forms and holding their hand through this process. But I think it's dangerous to say we're going to effectively ignore or circumvent that legislation. So it's a good point. That's what we're doing at the moment. But when the legislation is in place, we'll work with people as best we can to make sure they can comply.
Thank you very much, Phil. Just seeing a comment here from Grant. Did you want to come in, Grant, or not?
No, that's fine. No, I just as I say, I don't quite agree with Stuart on just willy-nilly, having these food tables and chairs and clogging up the pavements, because that's going to put pedestrians who are walking past on the pavements. Pavements are there for people to walk on, and yes, I do understand that if you've got the space that residents or pedestrians can walk safely past those things, then I don't have any problem with issuing of the licenses. But as I say, I do have a strong concern that you don't just give it willy-nilly just to get businesses up and going. If they've got the space, then go for it. But other than that, no, I wouldn't just willy-nilly give it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring this to conclusion because we've got a lot on the agenda. Time's moving on. Just before I do, one quick question on the £75 fee. Some of these shops are very, very small. I can think of cafes where they've only got tables of 6 or 7 or 8 chairs. Very small cafes, one or two seats outside. Really, the person running it is self-employed and on not very much money either. You can think of these establishments. So this fee of £75, I know it covers our costs, but in this COVID situation, which is what legislation is designed for, specifically, comments Phil made and others have made about hopefully business get up and running. That's what the whole purpose is about. Is it really necessary to charge this £75 in this set of circumstances where we've got these restaurants and businesses that have been closed down for some time? Is that really necessary, officers?
Thank you, Chair. The legislation places a cap, maximum cap of £100 on the fee, and it will be within the Cabinet's gift to decide where to position it. We've recommended £75. It's in line with some other Norfolk councils that have come up with broadly the same figure, and it is based on a calculation that we've done to recover licensing officers' time. We're not quite sure what the burden on officers is going to be from this. There are many, potentially hundreds of businesses that could potentially apply. It remains to see how many do, but there is, even though it's a streamlined process, there is quite a lot of work involved in publicising the application, carrying out the consultations, and then determining it within a relatively short space of time. So to protect the service, we've tried to set the fee at a figure that kind of breaks even for us.
Okay. Is there anybody else on that point? If not, then it's probably prudent to move on.
Yes, please, Chair. Let's come back.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, I know the instinct is to say we have the power, let's use it. But if we take licenses of public houses, etc., the local authorities have the power to give carte blanche to public houses and the like to say to them all, you can open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And some local authorities did do that. But the sanctions were there that if they didn't behave themselves and their customers didn't behave, then the sanctions were far more onerous than with the previous legislation. And from what I do not know, there's been no problem with those local authorities who've given carte blanche 24-hour licenses, simply because the publicans know that they have to behave themselves or else they'll get the licenses with curtailed. And I think this will be the same if we say to restaurants and cafes, etc., look, you can go on the pavement, but you've got to abide by a code of conduct. Thank you, Chair.
Okie dokie. So I think I'm going to bring this to a conclusion now. I am picking up from Nigel, sure, waive all fees until COVID is gone. I'm not picking up a proposal or seconder for that. We've heard the officer's response there. So unless there is, I'm going to move to conclusions. Recommendations on page 132, 8.1, and they follow through.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Sue.
I'd like to support that suggestion, that proposal, that there's a time limit within which people can make applications and then get them through free of charge, because this is going to be a summer and maybe autumn thing, but come the winter, I don't think many places are going to be able to invest in all the heaters and everything else they might need. So perhaps if we just had a temporary 6-month free application period, and then after that it would be with a fee for next year.
Okie dokie. I would actually second that. I did raise it originally, thank you, Sue, because I just think that in these times, £75 could be actually, you know, they're strapped some of these very small places. So we've had a mover, we've had a seconder on that myself. I'll put it to the vote, please. So that's to have a period of 6 months free application fees on this. All those in favour? There's an amendment.
Chairman, would you like me to go through the names and get members to confirm their support?
Yes, please.
Mr. Adams.
For.
Mr. Beadle.
For.
Mr. Brennan.
For.
Mr. Bullman.
Against.
Ms. Catchpole.
For.
Ms. Hartley.
For.
Ms. Holland.
For.
Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly. Is he present? Can't see him.
Against.
Against. Mr. Nurden.
For.
Mr. Prutton. Mrs. Prutton.
For.
Mr. Riley.
For.
And Mr. Shaw.
For.
So that's 1, 2, 6, 10 for and 2 against. So that's carried.
Thank you, James. Right, so, and I'd just like to thank the officers for their report here and all the questions. We'll swiftly move on. I'll just say to everyone, it's now just gone 10 to 11. So we will need to keep that in mind as we go through these reports. We've got a few more to go through yet. So turning back to the agenda, we're now back to the agenda as it's laid out. Item 9, Council Performance Broadland Business Plan. I'm not sure who's presenting here, James.
Every moment.
We got 8.
Rodney.
We got 8 on item 8.
I think it's an item before mine, yes.
Sorry?
Haven't we got item 8 first?
You're right. In actual fact, I've completely mucking around with this agenda. Sorry about that. You're right. We've got 8 does come before 9. Well done on that. Broadland, South Norfolk, plan for recovery. I still don't know who the officer is on this one. Plan for recovery for COVID-19. Page 22.
It should be Sinead, I think.
Sinead.
Yeah, thank you,
Sinead.
Chair.
Hello, Sinead.
Hello. Thank you. So this report outlines Broadland Council's plan for recovery to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and this is working in collaboration with South Norfolk Council. So the report itself, it provides an overview of the current context in terms of the current impacts and challenges of the pandemic, and that's on our economy, communities and councils to date. It also provides a review of the priority delivery areas for us to focus on in the coming months. So just to give you a bit of background, so obviously the pandemic is an unprecedented global challenge and it continues to have significant impacts on our communities and businesses. The initial response phase in Broadland has quite rightly been focused on the immediate emergency response and the challenge this has brought to us over the last few months. Although this work does continue, it's been vital for us to start planning ahead for the future term impacts and challenges of the pandemic to ensure in the right position to respond and act quickly to these changes. So the recovery plan itself, so the plan outlines the planning work that is underway across Broadland and South Norfolk to support the districts to recover from the pandemic. The plan is shaped around 3 key themes, and these are the economy, communities, and then organisation and governance. Within the plan itself, each of these key themes are then broken down into what we see as our initial and quite high level short, medium and long-term priority actions. And then alongside these, we have our measures of success, and this is for us to be able to track our performance against the plan. Just to note, while it's important we do set out these early priorities, it should be recognised that this plan is going to need to remain flexible as the impacts of the pandemic become clearer over time. And just finally, in terms of the recommendations, alongside recommending the adoption of this plan, the report also recommends that we review and update the delivery plan, which was agreed by councils in April. And this is the delivery plan for 2020-21, which sets out all of the priority pieces of work we are planning on delivering over the coming year. So the recommendation asks for us to be able to update that plan in line with this recovery plan to make sure we're picking up those priority areas to support us to recover from the pandemic. And I will just pause there and see if you've got any questions.
Councillor Nowden.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the first item on the cabinet papers, so of course I had a look at it with a bit of scrutiny in mind. Firstly, please can officers proofread the reports before they publish it, because there are a number of typo errors and inaccuracies in the report, which I was rather disappointed to see. My first question really is, I think it relates to governance, and that is this is a report. Well, it's actually a plan for both councils, and if I was to go through this and make some comments and maybe recommendations on this report before it goes to our scrutiny committee, I would have thought that this is something that should have been a lot earlier, gone through joint scrutiny, rather than following the process of just going to each council's overview and scrutiny committee onto cabinet and then to full council for approval. So that was my overall comments on that. I'm also looking at in the report, there's a paragraph 5.6 on the risks, and what it says here is that organizational risks associated with the recovery plan and delivery plan will be monitored and reported to members as part of the quarterly performance report. So I'm saying, well, what are the associated risks? We need to know what is being identified so that we can know what is being monitored. So that's just my first comments before actually going into the typos and inaccuracies in the actual plan itself.
Thank you. So as the report says, there are a number of operational risks associated to this, which are starting to be pulled together as we speak. And as you can imagine, these are changing day by day as the pandemic changes and as the impacts change. And we will be bringing those forward through to cabinets and through ONS as part of the performance reports with the organisational risks as we currently do.
Is there any comment on the fact that it didn't go to the joint scrutiny? Because I would have thought that this is an ideal opportunity for us to get together with South Norfolk and actually thrash out some of the plans so that it is properly a joint plan.
Grant, just before the officer comes in, could I just make a comment about this? I've got some serious concerns about this, the point about joint scrutiny. At the moment, with the process within each council is really clear in terms of how scrutiny applies to decision-making executive. So, for instance, the cabinet through to council. On this one, I think we'd just be duplicating and wasting a lot of time personally, Grant. Not usual, Grant, that me and you would be differing. We seem to converge a lot on the same point. However, on this one, I think we just will differ. That when you look at joint scrutiny, I'm not quite sure what joint scrutiny is scrutinising to, because we don't have a joint cabinet decision-making process. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect going on there that somewhere along the line is going to have to be thought through a little bit more within the councils in terms of governance and how we're operating. And for me, you know, if I was sitting at a joint scrutiny listening to this and I come back to our own scrutiny, I'd be thinking, well, hold on, we just duplicated this purpose, bearing in mind that this has to go to Broadland's cabinet, not to a joint cabinet. So at the moment, I can see why this didn't go through a joint scrutiny process, because it's a little bit irrelevant and a bit of a waste of time, in my personal view. But I don't know if Sinead wants to come in or Emma on that, but that was my personal view about it anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if it's best for Emma or Debbie to come back on that point of governance.
Yeah. Okie doke.
Chair, I can just say Emma's actually had some IT issues at the moment. Her internet's gone down. My belief would be that it would go then back to each cabinet for them to take forward the recommendations of any joint scrutiny, that you know, any recommendations that come out of a joint scrutiny. But obviously it gives the opportunity for members to scrutinise at the same time, as you said.
Yeah, okie dokie, thank you.
And I've had that confirmation from Emma as well, that would be the case.
Yeah, okie dokie. Was there any, did you have another point, Grant, on this, or is that before I let other people in, or is that?
No, it was okay. We can agree to disagree, but when I read this report, I thought there's very little reference. Sorry, in the plan, there's very little reference to what Broadland has done as a whole. I mean, I would like to go through the actual plan and go through some of the what I would call typo inaccuracies or just comments. If the officer wants to go through the report, that's fine. Sorry, through the plan, that's fine. I will like to come back on some of the items. Thanks.
Okey-dokey. Okay, right. I'll open it up for other.
Councillor Borman
comments.
has his hand raised.
Who?
Councillor Borman and then Councillor Catchpole.
Nigel, fire away, please.
Councillor Bowman, that was. Not Nigel.
Oh, sorry. I've got an audio issue going on here on the bees. It's cutting out about halfway through sometimes on contributions as well. So Peter, fire away. Sorry about that, Nigel.
You're getting a personality complex here, you realise, Chairman. I don't know who I am. I'm probably at least two different characters, at least. Can I say, first of all, I agree with you entirely. I don't see the need for it to go to a joint scrutiny. I think that's a complete waste of time. Another layer of bureaucracy, and that's about the last thing we need. May I make a comment about operational matters rather than the thrust of this report, which is more strategic? Is that a yes?
Yeah. Does it appertain to the report?
Oh, it appertains to the report, but it's a more detail. I'll raise it anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
I wholly support the concept of trying to do what we can to support local businesses and to get people back into town centres, and anything that we can do to encourage that, I wholeheartedly support. May I make a comment about Aylsham, which I personally find at the moment something of an eyesore. I'm sure there's very good reasons for it to be like it is, with large red barriers being placed all up and down the town centre. But to me, it actually puts me off going into Aylsham, and I hate to say it, but I go across the border into Holt at the moment because it's a far more attractive place to go. And I just wonder if we've got the balance right here. I understand why those barriers are in, but actually they look very unsightly, and I think they're having an adverse impact on Aylsham and its ability to weather the virus. Just an observation.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, who is next?
Councillor Catchpole.
Sorry, Sue. I'm
Thank you, Chair.
I'm just going to say something here before we move on to Sue. Tony, can you just stand by because I'm getting real audio problems. I'm a bit concerned I might go down here on my net. So just stand by, Tony, in case I disappear. Okay. So far away, Sue.
Two things. One on the unsightliness of Aylsham. Yes, I agree. The town council agrees, and that was not the intention, but the provision of planters has just been slow to appear. So they are ordered apparently, and I'm sure Phil wanted to make a comment about that, and hopefully that can be improved as soon as possible. My point on the report was on page 37, the first sentence says, the way in which the organisation works and delivers services. Which organisation is that referring to? Surely that should be the organisations with an S, because then it goes on to say the two councils, or the councils with an S. And so that was a little bit of a surprise. And then I realised it must be a typo. It needs an S on the end.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does need an S on the end.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think Phil did want to respond to the comments regarding Aylsham.
Yes, got you now, Phil. Far away, Phil.
Yeah, thanks again, Chairman. Again, I'll be brief. I know that the issues of Aylsham aren't necessarily at the front and centre of this recovery plan, but it is just worth noting. I absolutely agree. The orange barriers are completely suboptimal in what you'd want to achieve in Red Lion Street. There was a balance between trying to ensure people's safety, making sure those narrow footpaths were sufficient for people to pass. Has it worked as we wanted it to? No. Are we going to try to make sure that we can work with local people to improve that? Yes. And continue to look at both short, medium and long-term options for Red Lion Street.
Thank you, Phil. And also that the ward members, of course, are have some consultation as well, which would be good.
But did I not include ward members in that? No. my sincere apologies.
Thank you, Phil.
It's taken as a given, Chairman.
Yes. Okay, thanks, Phil. Is a question from Sue Holland. Far away, Sue.
Yeah, it was just a question about I noticed on the short-term options on page 39, reimagine our service delivery and ways of working. There's a reference to delivery of IT equipment, which enables staff to work in a more agile manner. It includes a laptop rollout where appropriate and implementation of a joint Office 365 solution, which includes members. I'm just curious as to whether members are also included in the possibility of a laptop rollout rather than these teeny-weeny iPads, which actually make these meetings quite difficult to manage. I don't know if anybody else happens to feel that way, but that's how it seems to me.
Yes, yes. So the iPads are the bane of my life, as you know. 365 is being rolled out, as we know, and for me, I've been on about this for about 3 years. So as soon as it arrives, I've got you, Emma. As soon as it arrives, I'll be really a real happy bunny. On the laptop one, yeah, Emma, same question from me actually. Perhaps you've got some great news for us in terms of laptops for councillors.
Well, I'm now on my phone, so I myself am having absolute nightmare with my internet this morning. So I can only see you, Steve. So I'm assuming everyone else can hear me okay. So in terms of Office 365, that's officer and members will benefit from everything that Office 365 brings, and I really think that will open up a whole new world, to coin a better phrase. What we're also looking at as part of the equipment for staff is also the equipment for members, and that's something we need to look at and work through and make sure that we're providing you with the right tools to do your job. We also need to look at whether we get a committee system, because again, that will make life for members and officers much more easy and much more straightforward. So there's a plethora of things that we need to look at. So I can't give you an answer now, but it is something that we're looking at and how we can kind of take that forward, Chair.
And just one other point on that, Emma. I believe that we've said in the past that going to set up a councillor user group on IT. I think we went through that going all the way back to when we scrutinised the budget as well at some point. Just got a memory button pressing off there. I think it was said somewhere that we was going to have a user group, member IT user group set up.
Yeah, so what we had last night, Chair, I'm on committee meeting 2 of 5 this week. Last night was SEAC, which was the first one for a while, where we looked at the terms of reference. And I think what we'll be taking through there in the first instance, we'll need to get a meeting booked in, but part of that will be very much looking at IT equipment for both officers and members. And I think if we were, I remember you're right, we talked about a working group, it would probably come from that group.
Right. Okay.
But happy to widen it out as well if necessary, because I'm really keen to get kind of a lot of input into this one.
Yeah, and I think that there's possibly a few councillors that have been involved professionally in this kind of field as well, so it might be helpful. Thanks, Emma. Is there anything else on this item? If not,
Councillor Nurden's got his hand raised.
Right, Grant, fire away.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I did mention earlier that I wanted to be able to just go through the report, or sorry, the plan in a little bit of detail. So I'm going to just go page by page. I look at page 30 in the first big octagon or whatever it is. So it says GVA anticipated to decline 32%. I didn't know what GVA was. I had to go to this, what is it called, Resolution Foundation website to find out what it was. And it turns out it's gross value added. So yeah, I was a little bit thinking about that, because there's quite a few references to GVA, but there's no explanation of what GVA is. Also on page 31, on the far side of the report, should I say on the right, the top paragraph refers to local towns and villages and help businesses get back on their feet. This is not the case in the rural villages. If we look at page 33, we talk about the short term continue to take the necessary steps as part of our confidence campaign to promote our market towns and high streets, but there's no mention of villages. So that was page 31. Then I go on to page 32. The first thing is the short term. Support our businesses to survive and continue to operate, including the delivery of grant schemes where appropriate. In the short term, we're looking at the discretionary grant scheme. I just wondered if there was any other schemes, but I would have suggested that if there are any new schemes that the government may introduce, you could put that in there, because I don't know of any other existing schemes that we could help in the short term. Then the 1, 2, 3, the fourth bullet, review and progress our capital program with a view to supporting our businesses and economy. I would have thought that we would want to support local businesses and our local economy in the future. Then going down to the last bullet point, it says continue to ensure that residents have access to employment support schemes and services. And I question that. How can we ensure? We can have influence, yes, and we can advise, but I don't know how we can continue to ensure. Then we go into the medium term, and we look at the third bullet point, and it says develop an unlock service. And I don't know what an unlock service is, to resolve furlough issues and skills support to enable both continued trading. I don't know that we can do anything about the furlough. We can advise, but are we now going into advising on employment matters? It just seemed a little bit out of context there. Then it's we go further down, the second last bullet point. It says review of how working independently and things. I would have thought that maybe the medium term we could develop ideas of how working independently and in partnership we can support and grow our businesses. We're going down to the next page, page 33. Long term, again, second bullet point, continue to unblock constraints. How can we do this? Can we lobby or cajole? But we can't unblock. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. Then the next bullet point, encourage the adoption across Norfolk of a common set of contract standing orders in procurement. Other councils already have got their own contract standing orders, and this should read something like set up a Norfolk-wide procurement service, like something like NP Law. So I was a little bit concerned about that. Going on to the next one, short term. It's part of our promote our market towns and high streets, and to encourage people to visit and transact with our businesses. I think what I'm concerned about here is that you are forgetting about the rural villages, and of course I represent one of those areas where you've got quite a few rural villages. The last one under short term also talks about the measures to be taken in our high streets. I would have said comma, delete and just have market towns and villages. So we're being all inclusive, because this is, we want to get businesses not just in the market towns and high streets. We also want to get the rural economy going as well. So I'm a little concerned about that. A typo, last sentence under the medium term, where it says continuous, I think it's a typo, continuously review and improvement, continuously review and improve is what that should read, or continuous review and improvement of our measures. So that's that continuously review and improvement doesn't work together. Then going on to the long term, the first sentence there again, why not include our market, our villages as well? Then the last bullet point, review and consider the vision and future role of our market towns. And I think there should be a space between high and streets, and we also should include our villages again in that. Going on to the next page, which is 34, our plan for recovery communities. I'm looking at the narrative there, the second paragraph. Since 23rd of March, third sentence talks about from the community have been triaged by our Help Hubs team of staff. Now there are 2 Help Hubs, and I would have liked to have seen reference to that. The middle column, I would have said that it says on support from the government through different schemes such as furlough, council tax support, hardship, government, funding, etc. I would have said that it's not the government provides the furlough, but the council. So you need to have, after government, you need to have and local councils. And then they are aware of a number of cases of domestic abuse across Norfolk as a whole. This is a report for Broadland and South Norfolk, so I would have thought that it would be correct to say that this refers to the districts rather than Norfolk as a whole. Then going over further to the right, the next paragraph there, about the third last sentence, we talk about require working with all. That should be a space between those 2, that's a spelling, and then partners, and then as well harnessing community. So that's it should be as well as harnessing community. So again, my point of proofreading these things before they get published. Going on to page 35, again, in the short term, we've got the last bullet point, ensure the council tax recovery process need to the early help, and that should have an S because there are hubs, not just South Norfolk's hub. Right, then going on to the last bullet point on the medium term. It says support voluntary, etc. Last sentence reads, continue proving critical support to the community. That should be providing. I just want to...
Could I just pause there? When we've got you know, a typo or you know, semantics in terms of the wording, as Sue Pruden was saying earlier on, semantics issue, I think if it's, you know, 1 or 2, we've got time in the meeting to do it. It appears that your scrutiny eye here, Grant, is picking up a hell of a lot, which of course you're right to pick up on. However, look at the time for the meeting. I'm just wondering, is it possible, Grant, on these typos to actually put the rest of them through on an email? I know it's awkward, but it's just that I think we're going to run out of time today for this meeting. So unless there's is that possible, Grant? Could you do that?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I was just staying on page 35. Just another comment about volunteers. It's brilliant to take that through. However, volunteers have returned to work because they've gone off furlough. So yes, how are you going to make that sustainable? That was just one of the comments. Then going on to page 36, in the long term, the last one, it talks about secured long-term resilience, the hardship offer. My first question there is this not dependent on government support? Secondly, specifically, what are the internal systems and policies relevant to our hardship offer under that one? Then looking at our plan for recovery, organizational and governance. We were talking yesterday at the SIAC meeting about the, it says here that our IT capabilities and created an effective internal redeployment plan utilizing our flexible and agile workforce to ensure services being provided to vulnerable people and our businesses are fully resourced. I was just concerned about the fact that we're saying that that is now in place, but it is, when we go over the page to the plans, we're going to have all those things done in the short term. I think we should, that thing should really read that it is our intention rather than it is already a de facto fact. Then going into the middle paragraph there, they give an example of the South Norfolk Leisure Team launched a brand new YouTube channel. I was just wondering if there was any examples that they could have used to give some kind of praise almost to what Broadland has done. And we've done our COVID Heroes award scheme, which is something that maybe could be mentioned. Let me just see. The next, there's spelling. And then on the last page, page 40, you've got medium term, improve our service, offering more services and appointments online to improve customer service. I'm aware that Zoom has the ability, you can have multiple meeting rooms where officers can discuss issues face to face, and that's just something I thought, might be helpful. And then also the last one is long-term, deliver the 5-year IT investment program. I would have thought that that is something that we should rather have in the medium term. So yeah, that, Chairman, is pretty much my comments. And as I say, I would have enjoyed bouncing those ideas off with members of South Norfolk as well.
Great, Doug. Thank you, Grant. Unless there's anybody else, we move to the recommendation on this. Recommendations, I mean, on page 25. So we've got 1 and 2 here, haven't we, James?
Yes, you have.
Okie dokie. So we're looking. So the recommendation is actually for 1 or 2. It's not an either or, is it?
It's both.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll put that to the committee. Is the committee in agreement with recommending 1 and 2 to Cabinet? 7.7.
Is that unanimous?
What about with amendments?
Well, we've not had any amendments come through yet, proposed and seconded. Grant.
Chairman, can I make a suggestion? Is that okay? Can I interject to make a suggestion? I think trying to keep track of everything that Grant has just read out. James, I'm not quite sure, has probably captured that, and I think between myself and the officers, we probably not captured that. I think it would be useful if we could take it offline, so that we can take account of those when we take it through to Cabinet. But I'm not hearing, as you say, Chair, any proposals for changes unless there are any coming forward.
No, and the typos, Grant can, he could send through afterwards. There's no actual formal amendment here for Cabinet that I'm picking up. So on that basis, yes, on that basis, then have we got a unanimous position around this, or do we need a vote? Roll call.
Can officers just show, members show if they're in favour of the recommendations?
That looks like
yeah, that looks unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, everyone. And Grant, if you could forward that through, because a lot of the stuff you did say in there adds some relevance to it, plus also the typos as well, obviously. And if officers could just have a look at the typos, it'd make life a lot easier, I think, as Grant's quite rightly pointed out. And Sue also, Sue Pruden. Thank you. Moving on
Chairman, sorry, before we move on, it would be really, really helpful if this kind of thing could be fed in before the meeting, because then we can really concentrate the discussion on the right elements of the report. If I could make that request to members, that would really be appreciated.
Yeah, okie dokie.
Chairman, could I reinforce that point? Because quite frankly, all of those comments could have been put in writing beforehand. We could have had a chance to consider them. And quite frankly, we didn't really have an opportunity to consider them in any detail as they were delivered verbally. So if we could make a point for the future not having that kind of process, I think it would be extremely helpful. Don't you really agree, Emma?
Yeah, but can I just say that is one of the points why I was making earlier, that we could have scrutinized this thing properly, or this plan properly through the joint scrutiny, and we would have had input and comments from members of South Norfolk as well on some of the issues that I raised.
But that would just duplicate the situation. Plus, also we've got the cabinet situation, Grant. I think the point here is that there's 2 points. I'm going to be clear, and I'm going to move on. Okay. What the point is this: Grant and Sue and other members have made references to typos in the past. I think what's being said now is that if you spot that before the meeting, to save time at the meeting, what would be helpful is to flag those up via an email back in. And I think we could all agree with that because it does save time. However, I think there's a relevant point to officers which has been made by Grant and by Sue Pruden and by others in the past. Can we please have somebody proofread the documents before they go out, because it seems to be happening quite frequently. I know we've got COVID, I know we've got a stretched situation, but if that could be done, and then that would also save time on sending emails in the first place. And that would be very helpful. So if we can just have some sort of double checking proofreading, I think that would just help everybody. It'd save a lot of time, follow up, whether it's via email or people trying to correct in meetings. And I'm going to bring that to a conclusion, and I don't really want any other comments back on that, please. So I'm going to move on now to item 9, which I nearly took in the wrong place earlier on. Council performance, Broadland business plan. And I believe this is Rodney presenting on this.
It's Rodney and myself, Chair, Emma Pepper.
Thank you, Emma. So
that's okay.
Fire away, whoever's going first.
No problem. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction and just to really let you know, so this report is running from pages 42 to 90 of your cabinet papers. The report that we're presenting to you today, it details the council performance for Q4 running from January to March 2020. That's the final quarter of what was the Broadland business plan running up until the year 2020. As you will be aware, a new strategic and delivery plan was adopted earlier this year, and that took effect from the 1st of April, and any future performance reporting will be effective based on that new plan. So this is the current final plan as it stands at the moment. The recommendations being put forward to Cabinet are to note the performance, to note the capital, and to note the revenue expenditure positions. And just to give you context of how this report is made up, as there's 3 core elements to it. The report consists of an initial overview, which contains largely an overview of the financial summary perspective. That's contained within pages 42 to 48, and Rodney will be walking us through that this morning. We then have Appendix 1, which contains a detailed view on how the council has performed against its objectives and ambitions within the quarter of the reporting period, as set out within the business plan. And just to make you aware that that includes additional historical data, which you may not have seen before. So we're now graphically representing not only the performance for the quarter, but the performance for previous quarters and a comparison to previous years, as it just helps put some of that performance information in greater context. As a result of that, you will see that the graphs have been labelled to show you where the data is accumulatively calculated or where it is on a quarter by quarter basis. The final element of the report, which is contained within Appendix 2, is then a more detailed view of any of the financial variances that are covered both on our capital and revenue expenditure, and that can be found in pages 89 and 90. So if the chair agrees, we would propose to take the report initially with the finance section, so that's covering the overview and Appendix 2, and then we would move on to the detail of performance to offer out any questions.
Yes, thank you, Emma.
Over to you then, Rodney.
Well, thank you, Emma. Thank you, Chair. So very much just going to give a quick overview of the financial outturn. So very much this is in three elements: the revenue outturn, the capital outturn, and then looking further ahead. So the good news on the capital outturn, for the revenue outturn, is that we've got a positive variance of £2.8 million. So that means we've got a better outturn by £2.8 million compared to what we originally budgeted. To put this in context, what we were really saying at the start of the year, we thought we might need to take up to £2 million from our reserves to fund our budget for the current year. In actual fact, the outturn means we're actually able to add to our reserves by about £1 million. So that's where we've got that change from having to take money from reserve to being able to add to reserves. So in actual fact, the council's general fund balance, the main reserve, will go up from 14.3 million to almost 15.3 million pound this year. So that's very much a positive news story. The reason for these variances on the revenue budget are very much set out in paragraph 5.4 on page 45. And the key element of this was about the unbudgeted 1.3 million Section 31 grant, which is all to do with the business rates. This was expected. We've been reporting this throughout the year, so this isn't an unexpected variance, but actually it's a very useful addition to our budgets. There are some other variances there: investment income, savings from collaboration, and indeed Appendix 2 provides a further breakdown of the variances breaking down to that number. So that's very much the revenue outturn, very much good news in that we've been able to add to reserves rather than taking from the reserves. The capital outturn is very much in section 6 of this report. So we actually had a budget of capital expenditure of £5.7 million. We actually spent £4.4 million, and the actual detail of the schemes are set out on page 47 of this report. So you can see on a scheme by scheme basis, the actual outturn of these schemes. The third element is very much looking forward. We normally wouldn't look forward, as in this is very much Q4, what's the outturn position, but with COVID-19, it's probably worth reminding members that we have sort of taken an update on our 2021 budgets to full council on the 30th of June in order to reset our budgets for the coming year in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic. But very much it's a good news story from the outturn position, and very much pause for questions.
Thank you, Rodney. So open up for questions.
Councillor Adams has his hand.
Tony? Hello?
I'm going to be cheeky here, Jim. In the light of all these massive savings that we're making, can we have a properly resourced research officer for this committee, please, Emma? Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I think we'll be returning to this subject again in the future, perhaps in a more focused way. Thanks for coming, Tony, but I think we'll just move on at the moment. So any other questions?
Councillor Beadle's got his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a whole lot of meat in there, and you know, we just don't want to go through it line by line. But the one that jumped out at me was on page 47, disabled facilities grants. The budget is 1,354,000, and it was only 931,000. Why such a large variance?
Have you got any other question on that page, or are you okay, Stuart? And I'll ask.
No, I'm just picking and choosing, Chair.
Okay. Yes, could you just outline what the variance is, please, Rodney?
I'd say very much some of this depends on how quickly people apply for these grants, and indeed how quickly we can process them. I haven't got the full detail behind that. I might need to come back to you on that a bit more detail.
Thanks, Rodney.
Chair, it's you know, it's the budget is sort of nearly 50% more than the actual, and it's such a huge variance. It does jump out at you.
I'll take an action to come back to members with more detail on that.
And I'm guessing, Rodney, on the Warms Home Fund, this is because of the COVID situation with actually getting the work done.
So this wasn't relating to COVID. This was just sort of it took longer to actually get this up and running than we originally anticipated. So it's just a slippage in when this program will be delivered, as opposed to not being needed.
Okay, and in regards to that slippage, bearing in mind we haven't got installers, we've had an issue in terms of installers as well on Warm Home Funds. I'm guessing there's going to be a delay on that anyway due to that.
I would agree with that, yes. There will be a further delay caused by the COVID-19 to progress with some of these.
Chair, sorry, it's Jamie Sutterby. I can't switch my video back on, so
Jamie,
I can't
yes.
wave at you, but I can maybe give a little bit of.
Thank you, Jamie. That'd be really helpful.
On the DFG, and forgive me, Councillor Beadle, because I'm struggling to find the section you're referring to. But Rodney, the point about COVID and its impact upon DFG and the speed at which we can roll out adaptations and the availability of contractors has had a very tangible effect in the recent sort of 3 months. So that it may partly explain the way in which the budget is set as obviously very much incumbent on the Better Care Fund, which the County Council hold the ring on and is passed down through national government. And we're kind of beholden to that in many respects. If I can come though to the point about the Warm Homes Funds, there's a twofold impact. Again, quite correctly, Chair, there's an impact in terms of speed of delivery and availability of contractors to deliver warm homes adaptations that have been requested, but also the speed at which they've been able to roll out the programme and the uptake from the public has been slower than anticipated. The reason for the carryover is explained by that, but we've also renegotiated the profile with the funders so that there's a continuation of the scheme, so that we make sure we get the finances to the people who need it most. And that's been a fairly slow but ultimately satisfactory process. So I think getting it right rather than getting it done quickly was the kind of the point of the interjection. But councillors, please be rest assured that we are actively making sure all that money is dispensed to the people who need it most in terms of our residents.
Thank you, Jamie. That's helpful. Any other questions?
Sue Catchpole has her hand raised.
Sue, far away.
Thanks, Chair. On the same page, on page 47, the Thorpe Lodge refurbishment budget was 138,000, and the actual was only 29,000. So I was wondering what the gap was. What had we planned to do to refurbish Thorpe Lodge that we haven't done?
You want me to pick this up, Rodney?
If you could, please. I was just trying to get the information, but you might have it to hand.
I think I've got it off the top of my head. Let me think. Hold on. I think some of this was this last year's? It was, wasn't it?
It was.
I want to say it's some of the aircon and the heating system that we need to upgrade and look at, and it's. What's that? But it's just something that we need to look at, and we just carried it forward into this. There's no other reason than we just needed to carry it forward. It's a big bit of work that we need to plan out. I think that's what it was, Rodney, unless you can tell me different. I think that's what that was.
I think you're correct there, yes.
Yeah.
I haven't got that immediately to hand.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Can't see anything on the chat box.
No, can't see anything.
No.
Sorry, Councillor Holland.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, this may not be the right place to say it, but I was looking at the disabled facilities grant and wondering if we are looking at changing places for disabled people. I know that's quite a thing at the moment, that we definitely need more of those in Norfolk. So I just want to highlight that and check whether that's actually being considered as well, please.
Councillor, if I may, I'll pick that up with the officers involved and come back to you with more detail.
Thanks. Yes, and could you email us all of us, please, around that? It's quite an interesting issue and one that I know a number of us get picked up on via some residents on casework quite often, actually. So thanks, Jamie. Anyone else, or we'll move on?
Councillor Catchpod's got a hand raised.
Sue?
Just asking, are we able to ask questions at this point on Appendix 1, or is that coming?
That's coming.
Right. Thanks.
As far as I know, it is anyway. So just clearing that now up to page 48.
Yeah. So, Chairman, can I just say that actually the full financial reports and outturn will be presented to the audit committee this week. So there will be another opportunity for members to look at the financial position as part of the audit committee. But otherwise, I think we now pass back to Emma to go on to the actual performance element.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Okie dokie. So we're fine now to move on to page 49 and Emma. Thanks, Emma.
Absolutely. So this next section, as you know, will be laid out as per the business plan up to 2020.
Emma, I'm sorry, I've just had a thought actually. I've just looked at the time and I think we're on track. And then I've just thought, looking at what we've got left, got 2 items. We've got this and I've got 1 more. I'm thinking about time. I think this is probably just about right before you start, just to have a 5-minute comfort break. And then that would make sense then if you look at the time as well. And I think we'll be good to go to finish. So we'll take a 5-minute comfort break, everyone, yeah?
Chair, can I just ask all members to turn their videos off and make sure they're on mute whilst we have a break? Thank you.
Very good points, yes.
And be back at 11:45.
Yep. James, can you hear me?
Yes, I can indeed.
Do you want to do another roll call when we think everybody's back?
Yeah, I think there's a few still to come, isn't there?
Just for governance and Sarah and Emma.
Well remembered.
Just trying to be helpful, Sarah. Peter and Nigel not joined yet. I think. Who else? Emma needs to come back.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah, got you, Nigel.
I'm trying to start a video, but when I start a video, it says the message is, oh, no, it's all right. I think it's coming now. Bear with me. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
I got a problem too.
Oh, Nigel.
Nigel, I've just asked you to start your video. I think if you just say yes, that should start.
Oh, good at last. Okay.
There you go.
It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
No, we
But
can
I've now
see.
started. Well, you're
We can
now. We've
see you,
sorted
Nigel,
it.
but only half of your head. Can you just move your camera? Thank you, Nigel. I can see all of you now. Wonderful.
I have the same problem too, Emma Hodds. Could you please restart me, Sean Crook?
Yep.
Thank
I'm
you.
working my way around.
Oh, thanks, Emma. Sorry.
You should all be getting a prompt. And I think I've done everybody.
Yeah. Just Grant
Just Grant.
Nerden.
Yeah, I have asked him to start his video. I'll ask again. There we go. Yep, we're there, Chair.
Thank you.
Right, Chairman, would you like me to do a roll call to ensure everyone's there?
Yeah, well, I can actually. I think we can all see them.
You can see.
Yeah, we can. We've just got confirmation on that. I can see everybody. So just in terms of right. So I'm just looking for Emma Pepper.
Yes, still here.
Great, Emma. Just trying to scroll through to find you. Great. Okie dokie, Emma. Right, fire away.
So the section of the report we're now going to look into is Appendix 1. So that is running from pages 49 of the Cabinet Papers through to page 88. So this will cover the 17 main objectives that were identified within the Broadland Business Plan. As you can appreciate, there's quite a lot of information in there and quite a lot of measures that we would need to cover. So if Chair, you're comfortable, I would propose that we do this on a page-by-page basis and ask if there are comments or questions. And then we have a number of the directors and assistant directors available today, obviously, who are more the subject matter experts in these areas that we can open your questions to.
Thank you, Emma. Yeah, I think that's excellent suggestion there. If you'd like to proceed on that basis.
Of course. So to start, we're looking at Objective 1 for page 49. So any questions for page 49? No.
No.
Moving on, still with Objective 1, onto pages 50. No, and on to page 51, still covering objective number 1. No. So moving on to objective 2, that's starting off on page 52 of the Cabinet agenda. I think Sue.
Yeah, and also me. So can I I'll just quickly raise my one first, Sue. On 52 risk, I'll just read this part out. Since the levy and new standards were introduced, in terms of the apprenticeships situation, in 2017, there has been a steady decline in intermediate level apprenticeship start. And then it goes on to say, however, at the start of the year, the outlook for apprenticeship was looking reasonable. We've had sort of stuck the we've got a time and task review panel on this, on the levy and the effects of the levy, something that's concerning, and what we're hoping to do, and we're due yet to do it, is also have a look at the effects of the levy, and hopefully that gets fed back in somehow to the back into government level, in terms of perhaps the council's concerns around this on the evidence that we've found. But it's interesting that under risk, it's actually pointing to, it appears that since the levy was introduced, there's been a reduction as a result of that. Because if the levies are an inhibitor, then clearly that's a problem that needs to be unstuck somehow. So it's quite interesting that was in there. And Sue, was you on the same point?
Yes, Chair, I was very keen that perhaps this still points to the fact that although we said we'd delay the setting up of the time and task panel, perhaps we could set it up to get the background established. And also, I'm wondering to what extent we would be able to assist with the improvement of the numbers of apprenticeships as a council, or whether we would end up lobbying another organisation, which perhaps we could do more quickly, more speedily.
Yes. Are you or anybody else, Emma, able to come back on that?
So this one probably sits with, excuse me, with Phil as Director of Place.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to comment. I'd welcome, the panel's thoughts on this investigation. I think it's a real challenge. The levy has meant that a lot of businesses will, perhaps provide further training for their own staff, as an example, and direct their apprenticeship funds towards that rather than taking on new apprentices. There's been a challenge around training as well associated with that. And I think we need to, especially as we come out of COVID, continue to explore what our role is in providing training, in apprenticeship, and a panel's scrutiny of that issue help us in our thoughts, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. It's because it's an ongoing situation, this one. We've got two things going on. We've got the levy, plus also got the COVID, and then financial issues. And you see going forward, a skill shortage happening here as well, and lack of opportunity for people. So if we could...
Councillor Natasha Harpley.
Yeah, just before Natasha comes in. So if we can come, when we come back onto our normal business, perhaps we just have another look to see if there is actually anything we'd be doing to start a time and task on that. Back onto our next ONS meeting off the cabinet, if you see what I mean. So perhaps we just revisit that, officers, at the next ONS meeting to do with our work programme. Natasha?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure if this comes under the remit of the time and task, but would we be able to look into how many older people are using the scheme to upskill to degree level compared with what you would think of an apprentice, old school being school leavers and stuff like that? Because I'm seeing across the country in general, there are lots of councils included who are using the scheme to help people who could perhaps better afford it themselves anyway to get a degree. So it's upskilling their workforce, people who are already experienced in the world of work, for want of a better phrase, rather than younger people who are probably even more disadvantaged than ever. So would that be able to be worked out through the time and task, or is that out of our remit?
I think it's too. I think you make a very good point. There is an issue there in terms of adult, older, mature degrees, shall we say. There's that going on. Then there's also, of course, the vocational apprenticeships which we're talking about. So there's adult apprenticeships as well, which I suspect getting through COVID and after it, there could well be an issue for retraining in terms of adult apprenticeships as well. And I think, as Phil's saying, that whole area, the two issues, really do need to be looked at. The degree for older students and any support from companies in terms of that, I think it's a slightly different issue. Would you say so, Phil?
Yeah, from my perspective, clearly, I think with the apprenticeship levy, then more is being redirected towards maturer people or wanting to get retraining at a later stage of life. Lots of people would say that's a good thing.
It's not a bad thing, but it shouldn't be at the expense of young people either, who are already
absolutely. And I think that's our main concern as well. I think one of the other challenges in this field is now getting the data, because actually a company using their apprenticeship levy in that way is not as easily accessible as the old days of apprenticeships, where everyone was registered and it was much more easily to track apprenticeships, the numbers and what was happening around that arena. Much more difficult to get that data and then interrogate it in that same way. So actually, I think what you are describing is part and parcel of the apprenticeship levy discussion and exploration, but then you open up a can of worms, and you also may have difficulty in getting some of the data to help inform that discussion. I'm not saying don't do it, but there are some challenges with it.
And of course, Phil, in terms of this is the other thing about having scrutiny with the data. If then there's an issue, as we know, we suspect actually, getting that data, and you're quite right about that, is a problem now, then that could be flagged up via the time and task in terms of, well, there's an issue in terms of data, to be able to accurately see what's going on and then feed that back in as well. There's a problem with the system process with this. So yeah, we can make during the time and task, Natasha, we can make a kind of nod and a reference to that during. We need to set up the terms and reference for it exactly once the first time and task meets, as well as we usually do. So we can sort of have a look at how could that also be flushed out as well, perhaps in another way during that time and task terms and reference. Okay,
Brilliant.
Natasha?
Yeah, fabulous, thank you.
And I don't know what biscuit was you was eating, but it looked delicious just now, Natasha.
I had 3 of them.
Oh,
I'm hungry.
milk chocolate digestives are my one. Okie dokie. So moving on to page 53.
Yeah, so we're on 53, still with objective 2.
Yes, Chair. Just to say on 2.2 on 53, I think the business training centre is a great service by the council, and I would love to see this opened as soon as is reasonably practical to do so. And a lot of local authorities do not have a service like this, and it should be commended. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Stuart.
Any more on that page?
Yes, please. Just a small point. It says the Business Growth Club is being delivered weekly as an online service. Is it possible for us to observe one of those? If so, please could you send the link?
Bill, that's probably you again on that one.
Yeah, I'll look into that matter. And who do you want me to come back to? Do you want me to come back directly to Councillor Catchpole on that matter?
Well, if you could send an email out to all of us, because it's something I know in the past when we had business breakfast, a number of us did attend some of those actually. Just now on Zoom, it make it even easier. So yeah, if you could send that out to all of us.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions on page 53, we're still sticking with the same objective into page 54. And then we're starting to swap over to objective 3 on the bottom of page 54 relating to recycling rates. If there's no questions there, we're sticking with that objective all the way through into page 55 of the report. And through to 56 as well. No. So moving on to objective 54, which is at the latter end of page 57, and that comes through to the bottom of page 57. I think, is there
Councillor Shaw?
Nigel?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that this coming September, of course, we're going to get those big grants come through from government, £5,000 per household, possibly up to unlimited, depending. It will affect this no end, so I think that should be taken into account.
Any comment from the officers on that?
Jamie, would that be one you want to touch upon? I don't know if that falls within the people and communities remit.
Yeah, no comment other than to say noted, and I think that's a good suggestion. I'm assuming the council's referring to the government's announcements around access of funding for people around warm homes, part of Boris's objectives of getting the economy working.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarity. Yeah, in which case, yes, we've already clocked the opportunity and are pulling together a bid trying to make it on behalf of Norfolk on the basis that our warm homes team hosted by Broadland already works on the Norfolk footprint. So yes, we're on the front foot on that one. Thank you for pointing it out, Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, and I think, Jamie, it'd been great to have seen that in there as well, because it's something that's real and tangible, isn't it? You know, just to seeing that in there would have been great, I think.
I think, Councillor, it's possibly because it's only, I think it was only last week we got some of the information about the actual details of the bid, and obviously these papers were prepared well in advance of this meeting. So it's probably just a timing issue, but we'll try and pick it up next time.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. Emma?
Yes, no other questions on that. We'll move on to objective 5. So that's on pages 58, moving into page 59. Can't see any questions there. So I'm going to move us on to objective 6, which is starting halfway into page 60 and taking us through to the bottom of page 61. No. Objective 7 into page 62 and all the way through objective 7. If I take page 63 first, as this objective covers a couple of different pages. And on to page 64. And then halfway through into pages 65. No, objective 8 from 65 through 66 and into 67 on objective 8. No. And then into objective, excuse me, into objective 9, which is page 68 through to 69 and just into the top of page 70. No. So moving us on to objective 10, starting on page 70 and taking us through into halfway through on page 72. And then on to objective 11, which is a single measure on the top of page 73. And then remaining on page 73 into objective 12. No. Continuing on objective 12, we're now running through pages 74. Yeah, I think Sue Catchpole wants to come in there.
Sue?
Hi, thank you. On the 12.2A collection of rates, it says that under risk, the enforcement agent work is also on hold. Could you tell me how much longer for that is going to remain the case? Because obviously with the COVID situation, what we really don't want to happen is that people are hassled to pay bills that they can't pay.
Yeah, so I'll probably refer this one over to Rodney and or Debbie to answer. If that's okay.
Right, so the enforcement agent work, they're now back to start calling people, but it's actually going out to visit people. That is where enforcement agents are struggling. But I actually had an email this morning on this subject, which I haven't even caught up, so I think it's fairly imminent they will start being able to do their full enforcement work, but it literally is, I know, changing on a day-by-day basis.
Thank you, Rodney.
Chair, sorry, Chair, could I just add, obviously we always encourage our residents to get in contact with us if they are having payment difficulties, and obviously we would listen sympathetically to them and work out how much they can pay and everything. So, you know, we would certainly encourage, if you've got residents that are coming to you who are experiencing difficulties, please ask them to phone us and contact us as soon as they start to have difficulties, rather than leaving it to the point when we are having to sort of chase them. It's always easier to have the conversation up front.
Thank you, Debbie.
And if I just come back, I've just caught up with my email. It basically says the government has now provided the enforcement industry with a date of the 24th of August for them to start resuming visits to homes and businesses. So that's the current date we're working to, and that's literally is hot off the press today.
Thank you, Rodney, for finding that.
Can I ask then, that's the enforcement agent work on the 24th of August, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah. So it said that applications were suspended going to court. So have we reintroduced that now?
Again, I think the courts are still on hold at the moment. We're waiting a date for them to start them up again.
Right, that's great. I'm wondering if when these dates are known, they could be communicated to those residents who have been unable to pay, with contact details at the council for specific help, so that we try our very best to avoid moving from where they are to the court case and to the enforcement.
They always are sent a couple of letters, Sue, before we take enforcement action, and on all of those letters they are encouraged to try and contact us. So we do try and work with them. Obviously, you remember members approved that in line with the citizens' advice. We took that paper through and that policy through about how we handle debt, including
Yes,
council tax. So we do follow that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is because it's unprecedented times, whether we might have to step outside of our own procedure to advise residents that although there has been a suspension of court action and there has been a suspension of enforcement action, they are going to be resumed, when they're going to be resumed, and to encourage people to prioritise paying their council tax, which would save us money because we wouldn't have to go through those stages. But I think as a sort of one-off special COVID version of our letters, giving them really clear advice on not only to contact the council for assistance, but what might be a consequence of them contacting. So to try to even motivate them or encourage them to contact the council, to let them know what they might be in for if they do, which might be a barrier for some.
Yes, I mean, I think we will look at the letters that go out. I wouldn't do a special run because obviously there's a cost to contacting people, and people's circumstances change all the time. But yes, certainly on any letters, and certainly on social media, on our website and everything, we can make sure that those dates are put on there, and letters that we do send chasing, we can make sure that's incorporated.
Thank you.
Councillor Hartley has her hand raised.
Sorry, Tasha.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I was going to ask about the court as well. With evictions were suspended for a while, so obviously I'm concerned this is going to resume, particularly if there is going to be a second wave. This could then be, you know, problem upon problem. But in terms of this is what Sue was saying. I'm concerned about us being too rigid with our framework of how we deal with these things. I know we encourage people to make contact if we are having problems or they are having problems, but there is an increase of mental health problems at the minute that will have an impact on people wanting to come forward, and also an increase, quite a considerable increase, in domestic abuse since lockdown. These are all going to have an impact on people being able to pay their bills, being able to come forward and seek help. But I do hope that we won't just stick too rigidly to this is what we do, this is the time scale, etc., and just have a little bit of good old British common sense, as Boris likes to keep talking about.
Chair, we certainly will do that, but also we do have to follow the legislation. It's quite strict in how we do take action. So, you know, but we certainly do encourage residents to talk to us, and we try our best to help them. You know, and not only do we try and resolve how they can pay and look at how we can defer payments or certainly phase them, but also we obviously try and point them in the help of the early help hubs and other support that we can give them to try and obviously resolve some of their problems longer term than just a payment issue with council tax.
Chair, if I might add to that, I completely understand where the question is coming from, and I agree. You know, we don't want to construct systems that are counterintuitive and, you know, make situations for people worse than better. One, if there are any silver linings out of COVID, one of them is the extent of partnership working we've been seeing with our housing providers. And obviously, a lot of those people who are most affected will tend to find themselves in social properties. We're working with Saffron and Clarion, who are the two predominant stockholders in Broadland and South Norfolk, really looking at how we can be on the front foot in terms of identifying those who are struggling in arrears, because obviously the social providers are most concerned about the swell of demand that might hit them as well as us in terms of a release of allowance of evictions. But also trying to look at how we can be a bit more unilateral in the support we put in place for people, and a lot of that is reliant upon lower level and clinical level mental health support available through commissioners like the public health. So we're pulling those individuals together. There are steps towards creating a bit more of a strategic oversight of this sort of stuff, led by the RPs, which I think is really constructive. I'm always an optimist when it comes to these sorts of things. Often they don't come to fruition in the way we hope. I am hopeful that we'll land something a bit more cohesive, as I think that's where we've struggled in the past. There is only so much we as district councils can do when it comes to people's mental health, but it's absolutely a central issue for us.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Jamie, and Emma, and Debbie. Back to you, Emma.
So moving on to page 75 and into page 76, still sticking with that same objective, all the way through page, I think Councillor Catchpole might just want to
Councillor Shaw as well.
Sorry?
Sorry, I missed it. On the bottom of page 75, it says we do not know the full impact on businesses and their ability to pay business rates. Are there any indications already of how much the COVID situation might affect our collection of business rates?
Again, this is probably for Rodney or Debbie to pick up.
If I can just come in there. So at the moment on council tax, we're about 0.2% down on where we'd like to be at this stage of the year, end of June. And for business rates, we're about 2% down on where we'd like to be for the sort of a 2021 year. So it's still early stages, but they're the sort of levels we're looking at. But obviously the impact could increase as time goes on. But we do monitor this on a monthly basis just to see what the performance is.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also, just an observation, 0.2 as a district council is actually, in COVID, there are some other councils where that figure is significantly higher. So Broadland, we seem to be some resilience out there, notwithstanding the previous discussion. Back to you, Emma.
So, Councillor Shaw had his hand raised, sorry.
Nigel?
Thank you. Yeah, this is about 12.3 at the top of page 76. amount of investment income, it's looking very good at the moment. It could have been at least about £2 million more in our reserves, though, with hindsight, because if you consider the, well, France specifically and Italy, the grape harvest has been devastated because of COVID. People aren't able to pick it, and consequently, a lot of the wine that should have been a perfect year this year has been. Stop smiling, Steve.
I know it's coming, Nigel.
Well, let's put it this way. We've got a year missing in the wine harvest, and fine wines are going up in value like a skyrocket. And we could have, if we'd have invested in those as well, we'd have had at least £2 million more in our reserves. It's such a shame they're considered unethical. I don't see why they should be.
Nigel, I'm going to save a bit of time here with the officers, and as we've discussed this before, this is called speculative investment rather than the other kind of investment, and the council can't get involved with speculative investment, even though you're right, the risk, there's greater risk for greater returns, but we can't take that risk with speculative, unfortunately. And I'm going to move on, Nigel, and no doubt we will come back to this subject yet again at some point in the future. Thank you, Nigel. Back to you, Emma.
So taking us through 76 into page 77, and that takes us to the end of objective number 12. So starting on objective number 13, and that runs through from pages 78, 79, and into the very top of page 80. I think Councillor Catchpole, I can see there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So cost savings will be brought forward to the members through the joint lead member group. And when I read that, I thought, how does that happen? And then wondered whether we could possibly have something like a decision-making map for Broadland of which decisions are made in which committee and at what group, because it's not very plain, and I think it would be really useful, given that we have a joint overview and scrutiny committee that we don't know what that does and so on. So if that would be possible, that would be useful. Also, I picked up halfway down the page under 2 that we're heading towards a single website in 21-22. Why would we have a single website between the two councils? My third point on that page is about the telephoning difficulties that residents and councillors are having trying to get to speak to office staff, which we talked about in SAEC last night. But obviously some of the overview and scrutiny members didn't hear that conversation, and I just wondered whether, Emma, you could just summarise for the overview and scrutiny committee.
Do we want to pick up those points separately, because I think there's probably 3 elements in there, and Emma and Rodney, I'm probably looking at you for some of this as well. So in terms of the figures that go to joint lead members group, that tracks the costs and savings against the feasibility study, of which are then filtered through into the accounts that obviously Rodney's team manages. So they are still factored into future budgeting proposals and our medium-term financial plans. Rodney, is there anything you want to add on that finance point in terms of how the information comes through to the wider member group?
Just before Rodney does, I'd just like to make a point here. Whatever goes through the lead members group, it's been termed by officers as a forum. There's no legal decision-making powers involved with the lead members group. Anything that goes through the lead members group in terms of finance, and Rodney, I'm going to ask you to clarify in a moment, actually has to go through the due process and governance within each council. So it's really irrelevant, the issue that's being spoken about here in terms of figures going to the lead member group and the way it's laid out. Yeah, it could be put in the document. However, the real issue here is that whatever is taken through there goes back through to cabinet, scrutiny, within Broadland, not joint scrutiny, scrutiny within Broadland, Cabinet and Council. So the group, the joint lead members group, and the point here, I think it's given a kind of inference, which I think is what Sue's talking about, as if it's somehow some kind of decision making that then endorses this, and then that's the way everything operates. It is not. And Rodney, would you just like to clarify as well, please?
That's absolutely correct. Sort of, we could put the information for information to the joint lead members group, but we'll come back to the formal committee processes for any decisions that are needed.
And the information, of course.
Yes.
Okie dokie. There was 2 other points that Sue raised.
Chair, do you want me to pick those up?
Thank you, Emma.
No problem. So just on Sue's requested, I've written 3 things down that Sue's requested: a governance flowchart on decision making. More than happy to do that when I've got a spare couple of days. But I will do that for you. I'll take that away as an action. Then in terms of you mentioned the joint website, that was a decision that was made last year, I think it was, in terms of the joint domain. Part of that is the joint website project coming out of there. And then in terms of telephony, as I updated members of SEAC last night, the telephony system that we had based at Thorpe Lodge was a on-premise solution, which meant that you had to have your phones on site for them to be able to use them. Obviously, as we then had more people working from home, that caused us a few issues. So we were able to do a short-term workaround to get 40 lines enabled through a soft phone process, which meant staff could answer the phone wherever they were. That's now been upgraded, and we are now rolling that out across the rest of the council. There was a particular issue that was raised last night in a service area, and myself and Debbie have said we will take away and deal with that specific issue. We've just been dealing with legacy systems that we're now upgrading as part of the IT infrastructure.
Thank you, Emma. I think that's the 3 points covered. Anybody else on 80, 81? I've got a point of clarification. On 4.2, staff turnover, it's probably me, but I'm just a bit confused by the graphs here. We've got quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we've got 1 bar for quarter 1, 6.8. Then in quarter 2 we've got the 3. Quarter 3 we've got 1, and then quarter 4 we've got the 3 again. It's at the bottom of. So could somebody just clarify why there's the 2 bars and then the 3 bars? And also, I think it's linked to the top of the next page where it talks about risk and also comments. And it says the actual annual staff turnover is 10.70 of the workforce. The turnover data is for BDC only. And then in brackets, as such, this excludes South Norfolk Council Depot and leisure centres. I'm taking it, clarification on this, that the staff figures for South Norfolk are included because it says that it's only the depot and leisure centres that are excluded. Is that you, Emma, that could come back on this, Emma?
So it's probably both Emmas. In terms of graphical representation, that probably sits with myself. So as you're probably aware, in previous years, the report has come through to Broadland cabinets on quarter 2 and quarter 4 only. So we've presented that data, which is why you see multiple years for quarter 2 and quarter 4, but you only see the present year for quarter 1 and quarter 3. So it's just about where we have comparative data that was only available in Q2 and Q4. So that's why that's been visually represented in that way, but appreciate that's probably not necessarily clear from that diagram. In relation to the figures, Emma, do you want to touch upon that?
Yeah, so just picking that up in terms of, you're right in your summary, Steve. Sorry, I've lost my words. Been a long meeting. You're right in your summary. So we've got 1 officer team across the 2 councils, but what we have done is taken out depot and leisure because they're South Norfolk specific staff only, so they are out of that equation. But the 10.9 refers to all joint officers.
Okie dokie, thank you. And the staff figures, not including leisure and depot, I can understand why they're not in there actually. when you're going through this 10.70, it's quite a high number. I remember going back 2013, 14, 15, 16, and Broadland's figures was always around about the 5 to 6% mark. So if I was just wondering if outside the meeting, if somebody could just check on those figures, because then on scrutiny we may want to come back on this and kind of ask another question as to if it was running at 6 to 7% up to 2016, why since collaborative working has this sort of gone up?
Is Sarah come in here?
Yeah, I just want to make a point, sorry, Chairman. This is on your work programme. Staff turnover is a particular item that you referred to, and it's due to be considered by scrutiny in September.
I know.
Yeah, so we can look at that I mean, I've approached the officers for the data, and that's in process. So that will come back to you in September for more detailed scrutiny.
I know, Sarah, and that's why I'm making the point now. Because
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, in terms of detailed scrutiny, what is required there, coming off of this report, is some stats. Now, when we go into that detailed scrutiny on that, it'll be looking at reasons for leaving. It'll be looking at you know, feedback on people leaving. But what I'm saying here, ready for that, coming back off of these stats, is can we go back to 2013 through to 2016 and look at what the turnover was for Broadland? Because I believe, you know my memory, Sarah, I believe it's around 6 to 7%, and that is a comparator to then go, well then that could focus in on, well, what other issues are there? What's changed? So it's directly off of this data, and making that link through, ready for that work program, Sarah, you know.
Can I just come back on that point, because this obviously falls within my remit, and I've had a chat with Sarah about bringing something in September. What I'll do is I'll go back to 2013, but we'll do it through to present, so you can see the traction over that 7-year period. I think what it's worth noting as well is we have exit interviews with staff to establish the reasons why they're leaving. Obviously, I can't go into detail on those because that is personal reasons. But if there's any theme coming through, then we will then address that as a theme. So we are working on that. In terms of, just off the top of my head, in terms of that turnover figure, when I had a chat with the HR team about them, that has been pretty consistent over the last 3 or 4 years, but I will go back and just double check all of that, and as I say, get that ready for your work programme in September.
Thank you, Emma, much appreciated. Back to Emma Pepper.
Yeah, so Chair, could I come in again on page 80?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed at the top of page 80, under the previous objective, in the risk paragraph there, it says the key transformation projects have been identified by each directorate to ensure these are on track. Would you mind providing us with a list of which projects have been considered to be the key transformation projects, just so that we're aware, please? And under 14.1, one team staff survey was carried out in March 2020. When will we be able to see the results of that survey, please?
So if I could take the point relating to transformation, and absolutely we can share that list, and we'll do so via email if that's okay following the meeting. In terms of the other point, I'm back over to the other Emma.
Thanks, Emma. Tag team, Emma. So in terms of the staff survey, the results have now been shared with all of the staff, and an action plan has come out of that. And then I will look to provide something across team members in terms of that. Just building on that as well, we've been doing, I think I touched on it at SEAC last night, I can't remember. We've been doing wellbeing surveys. So we did one of those at the very start of COVID, and then we do what we're calling pulse surveys every couple of weeks. We're getting an absolutely fantastic response from our staff on that, sort of 80 to 90% response rate, which is absolutely brilliant. And it's really given us a good idea of how we need to, one, we're understanding ourselves, staff on an individual basis, which gives us a really good insight. And we're understanding how we can help to better support them now and going forwards. So we are getting some really good interaction with our staff in terms of this. And I'll, as I say, I'll look to send out a summary of the staff survey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to remind the committee, do a time check here. It's 12:30. We've got several more pages to go on this. Plus, we've got the environmental strategy, and also, of course, we've got the review of legal service provision. So I'm just reminding members, we do actually need to catch up on some time here. So back to you, Emma.
Yep.
Pepper.
I think we were back at page 82, moving on through page 83 and sticking with that same objective through pages 84 and onto the bottom of 85. Objective 16 being picked up on the top of page 85 and into objective 17 at the bottom of 86 and into 87. And that takes us through that same objective onto our final page 88.
Right.
Just a quick point, please.
Yes, quick points.
Page 86. Could you tell us the makeup of the group that is the strategy working group to take social mobility forward? And at the bottom of the very last page, the very last sentence on page 88, it's kind of suggests that something might have happened between the parties. I just wondered what it was.
So in terms of the first point, if that's okay, I think, Jamie, that probably sits with yourself.
Happy to. Thank you for the question, Councillor. It relates to an officer working group, which is just looking at the issues and the projects pertaining to social mobility and inclusive growth, and very much under the auspice of the structure previously taken through cabinets for both councils. For your information, really more than anything else, predominantly it's the portfolios that sit under the Assistant Director for Individuals and Families, the Assistant Director for Economic Development, and the Assistant Director for Planning, because they are the most pertinent agendas when it comes to social mobility and inclusive growth. But it's an officer working group it refers to.
Thank you.
And then I think in respect to Councillor Catchpole's final point, I believe that's relating to Greater Norwich. Phil, I don't know if that's one that you can come in on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Catchpole, can you, sorry, which bit are you actually referring to?
On page 88, under risk, it's highlighting the need for good working relationships. To such an extent, it suggests that something may have gone wrong. I just wondered what it was.
Yeah, no, it's not that something's gone wrong. It's just that in any partnership, there are always some challenges. Greater Norwich Partnership is no different to that. Anyone that is vaguely familiar with Greater Norwich Partnership knows that it is absolutely the right thing to be doing. It's the right partnership to be in, but there are sometimes political tensions there, which we just need to work through on a fairly regular basis.
Thank you.
And I think, Chair, that takes me to the end of the report.
It does. Thank you very much, Emma. I'm just turning to recommendation. And this is to note, Rodney, isn't it?
I've come in there. Yes, that's correct, Chairman. It's just noting.
Yeah, so we've got, so can we agree to agree with the recommendation to note the report? Agreed? How are we, James?
That looks to be unanimous. I can't see anyone objecting.
And if somebody does object, then they need to just say so. Gone. Thank you, James. Right, thank you very much, officers. That was quite a detailed report, and good to see you all again. And moving on to environmental strategy, page 91. Who's presenting?
It's Deborah.
Deborah, Hi. Thanks, Deborah. Good to see you. Fire away, please.
I think Phil's going to do a brief introduction before I make a start, if that's all right.
Yes. Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you very much, Chair. If you're not familiar with the environmental strategy, I'd be surprised. This has probably been the longest piece of work to try to get a strategy adopted, and has probably gone on for about a year. This was something that was going to be a joint strategy between Broadland and South Norfolk. In recent weeks, there has been a decoupling of some extent. The main contents of the strategies remain the same, but some of the presentation of that has changed. The version that is before you now is the one that has been before Environmental Excellence recently, and consists of 6 main themes, which you can see within the report, and an action plan appended at the back. It is important, and a number of the comments that have been received over a period of time is that not all the measures are there for the action plan. That's right, because this is going to be a living document. We wanted to get it to a point where members could accept it, and then we'll continue to work on it. But I'll hand over to Deborah and take you through a bit more of it.
Okay, so since you last saw it, the strategy has been redesigned and it now highlights what we as a council will do and the support we'd like from our communities and our businesses. So it does have some measures attached to it and some baseline figures where these are available. So basically we can assess our progress and measure how our successes. I'm happy for you to give me comments and questions specifically, but if you wouldn't mind using the page numbers on the actual strategy rather than the committee papers, just so I don't get confused, if that's all right. Thank you.
Right. What we've got here is the strategy, which is numbered in our committee papers. I'm not sure how else we can identify them from.
Yes. Chairman, there are page numbers on there. If you just bear with me.
There's probably 2, so you'd have one in the middle and then a little one on the side as well.
In green, yeah, in green and white.
Right, yeah, I've got you now.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. Right, so any questions, clarification? Just for
Councillor Leggett's got a hand raised.
just before you come in, Judy, I'm just going to ask if there's councillors at the moment. I was going to invite you in anyway. Are there any councillors on any questions at the moment? No? Fire away, Judy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make 1 or 2 points. I'm very conscious of the amount of time it's taken to get to this stage. I just want to again thank Deborah and Ali for all their work on this. And indeed, I would like it to have been in a slightly different format when it got to you, but I do appreciate the constraints. Going forward, as we've said, it's a living document. We're looking at a couple of initiatives sooner rather than later, which is tree planting and once again increasing recycling, and of course supporting our community litter picks. But there are other items to be done. There's lots to do. It stretches right across the whole remit of the council. It's an area that our residents are very interested in. We need to make progress, and I'm sure you will have noted the excuse me, the comment on resources, and indeed, and also I hope you'll forgive the food typos that are still there, but they will be ironed out. But we do need to get started on this and to be able to demonstrate to our residents what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Any clarification or questions, councillors? No, okie dokie. In that case, we could go to the recommendation. Turning back. Right, Right, page 93. The Cabinet recommends to Council to approve the environmental strategy subject to an amendment suggested by Cabinet. All those in favour, do we agree? We're looking, James.
That looks to be unanimous to me.
Thank you, James. Thank you, officers and Judy. Moving on to item 12, exclusion of press and public, which I'll just read. My favourite thing to read, this is. The Chair will move that the press and public be excluded from meeting for the remaining item of business because otherwise information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006 would be disclosed to them.